Welcome to the Family Bible Study. My name is TJ, and we have been in a what I like to call a deep dive study in James chapter 3. And I don't know, for some of us it may have been pretty tough. It's a challenge. It's challenging. The whole book of James really just comes at you. So we're going to continue where we left off. But if you guys not familiar with us, there is a YouTube channel, and that is the Faith, Hope, Initiative, the Faith, Hope, Love Initiative channel, and it is just abbreviated on there, the FHL Initiative YouTube channel, so you can check that out. Lots of other videos beyond the Bible studies, lots of different audio books that I've put together, written down, like the Lord has impressed upon my heart to write. Those are on there, and then lots of other great ministries and ministers in the playlist section. Check that out. And it's a great place to just really build yourself up in faith. And so with that said, let's get into this, okay? James chapter 3. Now we are down to verse 14. As of last week, we kind of covered 14, and then I hit on 15, and I said we might circle back to 15 this week. But the sentence begins in, at least in the NASB 1995 version, which is what I'm using, it begins in in verse 14. So we're going to pick up there. And to preface this, my background, I've been in the business world for a long time, and I was in lots of organizational business world type of stuff, okay? And so as I read this, it's talking about selfish ambition. It's talking about, personal ambition, one-upsmanship, these type of concepts, even without sometimes using those exact words. And you'll see that a lot in the business world. You'll see that a lot in the church world. Almost anywhere there's an organization, and probably anywhere there's an organization on the planet, you're going to see these different traits pop up, and they're like weeds. It's like anywhere you plant a garden. For the most part, you're usually going to find weeds that pop up wherever you happen to be, because it's just in the earth. Satan is the dominant influence. His ways are the dominant influence. And so because of that, his traits, which is selfishness, ambition, everything always comes back to self. Self-centeredness and fear are kind of the prevalent things in Satan's world, and therefore very prevalent throughout the earth. As we've talked about in our studies quite a bit, I think Satan is called the god of this world in the Bible. He is called, with a lowercase g, the god of this world, meaning he's the primary influence. And Jesus called him the prince of this world. And that just simply means, like I said, he's running things behind the scenes. Now, ultimately, God's plan is working out. Ultimately, if you read the book of Revelation, what he has set up and what he said is going to play out just that way. But in the meantime, why is there so much just hatred and war and spats and divorce and murder and stealing and all these different things? Why is that? Because of Satan. Now, when he's taken out, you don't see that type of stuff like in heaven. Why is there none of those things? Because there's no influence of Satan. So you just have to kind of I'm trying to help you understand this as we get into these next steps, because a lot of times God is talked about and God has become more acceptable, especially in the United States of America. But Satan is not talked about as much. And that's right. I mean, we should obviously be glorifying God. But we have a very real enemy against us. And if you don't know your enemy very well, then you are going to be ran over roughshod, you and I. And so the better we understand his tactics, the way he is, then the better we can identify them in our lives. Like I was saying, in organizations. And that doesn't mean doesn't matter if the organization is anything as small of a unit as your family or a sports team or a job environment, a business organization, a church, a nation, whatever the case may be. You'll see these little weeds of Satan's personality pop up. And even the Lord's actually had been having me write a book called Know Your Enemy. and it's an audio book. It's on the FHL Initiative channel that you can go through. I think we're on like chapter 8 or 9. I'm kind of releasing it in chapters. So part 5 just got released a couple weeks ago. But it's just giving insight into who Satan is, how he operates. Because if we can identify his traits, then we can get those things out of our lives, and which is good, because his things hurt us, they're harming us. Whether we know about them or not, they're still harming us, okay? So let's go ahead and dive into the reading here. So verse 14, chapter 3, verse 14 says, "But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your heart, do not be arrogant and so lie against the truth. This wisdom is not that which comes down from above, but is earthly, natural, demonic." So I'm going to touch base on 15 here. That type of wisdom, this selfish ambition. In other words, you come up with creative ideas. How can I get ahead, and how can I beat this other person or whatever in my job environment, or how can I take that spot that I'm interested in taking or whatever. I'll tell you, in the world, now some of this, what I'm going to say, for probably a lot of people, it's almost going to grind against the mentality probably that you have and you feel is right. The only reason I say that is because that's exactly what it did to me. So in the business world, I was very into motivational materials, self-help books, all these like organizational leadership books and things to this general nature. And I had stacks of these books, and I would hand them out. I mean, I just kept tons of them even in my trunk. And I was like, oh, this was helpful. I would just hand them out to people left and right. And these books, they have these different principles, and some of them can be helpful and useful, but the way Satan works, if you look at the Garden of Eden, he wanted Adam and Eve to eat from he wanted Adam and Eve, but he was talking to Eve, and he wanted Eve to eat from the tree of good and evil, And he promotes the benefits of that tree. He's like, well, if you eat from this tree, God knows that your eyes are going to be open and that you're going to be able to see things, I'm paraphrasing here, but more like God. You'll be able to discern good and bad and so on. And he says it'll make you more like God, essentially. And there's some truth to that. When they ate the fruit, they were able to see both good and bad. He just doesn't tell you about the other side of it. Like, for example, he tells them, you're not going to die. Did God say you'll die? You won't die. And when they ate the fruit, they didn't immediately physically drop dead. That is accurate. But they started to die. Actually, if you look it up in the original language, God told them, if you eat the fruit, dying, you will die. In other words, there's this progress where they were never supposed to start progressively dying. They were supposed to be able to live on in their physical bodies infinitely, on and on and on. But Satan doesn't tell you that. It's always the stuff he doesn't tell you that gets you, okay? And so it is with all these things that I plugged into. I was, like I said, very into these different self-help books and these different motivational leadership books. And I was very into listening to audios, and I would constantly keep these things playing, and, motivational materials. And the theme for those things were very much believe in yourself, work hard, strive, and be the hardest working person in the room, and be the smartest person in the room, and these concepts. Now, I told you, some of you guys are going to be like, what's wrong with that? Well, you pick up your Bible. That's what I had to do. And actually, there was a good minister friend of mine that really helped me to see these things, and start reading it. And you tell me if you see that type of stuff, be the hardest working person in the room, and, beat everybody else out, and just, it's all based on how smart you are and these different things, That's not at all. It doesn't say anywhere, believe in yourself. It talks about believing in God, having faith in God. All things are possible with God. All things are possible for those who believe in God, these type of scenarios. And why am I saying that? Because when we are counting on God, it really helps to cut out all this stuff that this verse is talking about, this selfish ambition and this bitter jealousy and all this different stuff, because it's tougher, not impossible, but it's tougher to come to God and say, God, help me just beat my coworker and take it, and just take over this office. And so, so I can be promoted so people can see me. Now, what happens in reality is a lot of times that has been the attitude for different ones of us. And I'll be honest with you, I've certainly been there where it's like, God, I want to succeed. I want to be the best. I want the biggest house and bank accounts and things like this because I want to glorify you. I think if I have all this stuff, people will see me, And again, is that what Jesus told the disciples? In the world, that's such an acceptable mindset. But if you look at the New Testament, you're not going to see that type of stuff. But what you do see is God saying, listen, I'm going to send you out and the Holy Spirit is in you. And if you will follow, if you'll listen, if you'll hear from the Holy Spirit and follow him, then he will lead us. That's what Jesus showed us. John 5:17, 18, 19, those concepts are in there. John 5:30, where Jesus says, I only do what I see the Father do. I only say what I hear the Father say. He didn't say, I succeed because I work hard. When the Father told him to go out and do, he went out and did. If it kept him out there all day and there was lots of people to heal and take care of and all this different stuff, then he did that. But when the Father told him to draw away from the crowds, he would also do that. When he said to go get rest, Jesus would go get rest. You would see him in the Word taking the disciples away, far away from their normal ministry spot, and he was taking them away to where they could rest and he could just teach them one-on-one. It wasn't always just go, go, go. Now, as we read the Bible, if you're not really looking for it, that's probably all you see is just go, go, go from Jesus. But even then, you have to remember, Jesus only did ministry for 3.5 years, about that, and he was 30 years old when he entered ministry. That means for 30 years, he didn't do any ministry. He didn't heal anybody. He didn't preach any messages. He didn't clear out any temples. He didn't do any of that. So what happens to being the hardest working person? What happened to that? And then remember, and I've said this lots of times, I'll say it again, I'm sure, in that 3.5 years, that effective work of Jesus has flipped the world right side up for those of us who have believed in him. His impact has lasted for eternity because he was the best at laying himself down what he wanted, his ambitions, his desires. He was the best out of any of us of laying those down and only doing what God gave him to do, what the Father impressed upon him. He would spend time with the Father. Now, a lot of times people are like, well, yes, it's Jesus. Well, it was Jesus, but Jesus is a model of us. Jesus was already the Son of God in heaven. So why did he come into a physical body? Because we're in a physical body. He wanted to model for us what humanity was supposed to look like. This is the way a human being is supposed to live. It was a model for you and me. He was a model not just for us, but of us, right? As one of us. And so as a model for one of us, what we see from him is he would pull away from the crowds, pull away from people, and all the stuff, the busy stuff, all the stuff he had going on, the things he could do for the Lord, he put those aside. So the question for you and me is, can we do that? Like, are we capable? And the answer is yes. We can set things aside and say, I'm not going to be busy with my work, my job, my friends, church work, anything else. This time frame, I'm setting aside for just me and the Lord on a routine, regular basis. You're just maybe you in your Bible, or just you praising the Lord, just you singing to the Lord, you just communing with him, fellowshipping, being quiet and listening, like the word says, wait on the Lord. Sometimes you just got to wait for him to see what he wants to do in that time frame. And most of us, like for me, that was hard. I like to move, I like to do, I like to get things done, I like to plan, I like to strategize. I'm talking about in my natural self. And so I had to recognize that and say, I have to set these things aside, and I have to look at what Jesus did, and I want to imitate that. And that's one of the things the word says to us is it says, as dearly beloved children, be imitators of God. And we want to imitate what God does. And so we can physically see what God does by reading his word and saying, that's how Jesus is. That's how he did it. that's what I'm going to do. And we can begin imitating him. And the Holy Spirit will help us because we have a helper. And so I'm trying to take these, a lot of times these big concepts and just bring them down. For what helped me is making them really simple. And I was like, well, Jesus pulled away. I'm going to pull away from people and just spend time with you on a regular routine, not just like you have to do it like clockwork in terms of it has to be that way. I mean, it can, but I'm saying it becomes your dominant desire and priority to get away with God every day, whether that be at the same time or a different time or whatever, because Jesus would often pull away in the morning before he would go out. But sometimes we would see him pull away in the evening. Other times the disciples were waiting on him and he was praying somewhere. So it wasn't routine in terms of time frame, but it was his regular practice on a consistent basis to pull away. So I'm strongly obviously advocating that we learn to do that, because unless you make that a priority in your life, it won't be a priority. And that's where these weeds start growing up freely, all this selfish ambition and these desires, because instead of God's desires growing up big in you from spending time with him, then if we don't associate with him, we're associating with the world a lot. So we're seeing a lot of media, TV, commercials, advertisements, billboards you drive by, and they're loud and they're always promoting you need bigger stuff, better stuff, a better lifestyle, more money, you need more gadgets, more things, you need to eat over here and eat over here. It's constantly flashing these messages, and it's always kind of angling, if you haven't noticed, to a certain paradigm. You want to be skinny and fit and rich and a nice car, and if you don't have these things, you should be striving for them, because this is where you're supposed to be. Says who? Says who? That the world? That the Satan influenced world tells me this is who I'm supposed to be. So what we do as believers is we can do the opposite. We open up the book, the Bible, and we look in there, and that's who we're supposed to be. This is who we're supposed to be. But if that book's not in front of your face very often, it's not going to be the dominant influence on your mind. You're going to be influenced by a bunch of other things, and that's an uphill battle. I mean, it's hard enough to live in this world. If we are in front of that book and we're spending time with God, how much more are we going to just drift into the waves of the world if we aren't in that book and spending time with the Lord all the time? And so this is why in verse 14 says, but if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your heart, I like to think of your heart as kind of like the grand central station of your being. It's not just your spirit. Your spirit meets there. It's your soul, your mind, your emotions, all these different things. And they're tied very close together. But the more and the more you spend time with the Lord, the more you can start getting clarity of, this is the Lord speaking to me. This is spiritual. These things over here, this ambition, this isn't God. Now, if you're in church quite a bit, if you do read the word a lot of times we back up our ambitions, our personal ambitions, and I mean the ones that aren't good. They're us generating things from our mind, looking around the world and coming up with stuff. We have a way of spiritualizing them. And what I mean by that is we're like, well, I want that, and I know the Lord says he gives me good things, all good things to enjoy. That's what the word says. And we say, and also the Lord said, be fruitful and multiply and be blessing, and you're blessed going in, you're blessed going out, and all these different things. And we just stack up all these verses that back up what we want to go and do anyway. Now, what's wrong with that is we run into all kinds of problems that the Lord never ever intended us to get into, striving to get these things, okay? And so that going on, verse 15 says, this wisdom, and so I was talking about these self-help ideas and these ways of getting ahead, and if you can strategize this, and if you can work hard, and if you can learn certain things every single day of your life, and if you'll spend enough time, all this different stuff, they call that wisdom in the world. And there's YouTube gurus, and there's all kind of financial gurus, like whatever area of life you want to grow in, there's a guru for that, right? There's a fitness guru, there's a nutrition guru, and they all have their little advices. But I'm going to give you a tip, okay? This may shock you. None of those people are smarter than God. And in fact, all of them combined, okay, aren't smarter than God. Like, you can take everything that those gurus know. You pick your favorite motivational guru, and all of their people, and all the, put them all together and they would not fill a thimble compared to the ocean of what God knows. We as believers have access to the best that there possibly ever could be and ever will be. But we, all of us, you and me, have to learn to access that wisdom. And that is because it is spiritual. It's from the Holy Spirit. He'll illuminate our understanding and we will see ideas, strategies, ways of doing things that just other people don't see. And it's like, Lord, wow, what an idea. I never would have thought of that. He's like, I know. You're like, thank you. And we can go implement these things. Or, hey, I'm having this issue or this conflict or this person is, blocking me in some way in life. They are, for whatever, probably all of us have been there. There's some person that is being challenging in your life, and God has a way of working around that person or teaching you how to handle that person in a godly fashion so that things work out. Like, he's got the better advice. And so the wisdom that the world's willing to give fits into verse 15. It says, this wisdom is not that which comes down from above, but it is earthly. It's natural. It's demonic. Now, I'm loving the fact I'm reading this, because if I were to say it myself, like, oh, all this different stuff that we're relying on, and these things I relied on for years, if I were just to say, man, these things are earthly, natural, and demonic, people are like, I don't know about all that. Well, if you believe the word, they're earthly, natural, and demonic. What does that mean? It means they're generated from the thought process of human beings. And just like Adam and Eve had an idea, quote unquote, Eve was like, I'm going to eat this fruit and then give it to my husband, and he was going to go along with her. That could be considered as Eve's idea, I guess, because after all, she's the one that took up the initiative and then Adam followed suit. But really, where did it come from? It was Satan's idea that was suggested to Eve. And that's the way it is to this day. Satan doesn't show up physically as a snake anymore. He doesn't have to. He can directly access us by influencing our minds and giving us ideas in our minds. And then we go, oh, you know what? I have a thought. We don't know it's from him. And we start following through on that thought. Or someone has a thought and they go, this is a great thought. They start operating and getting some momentum. They get some success in the world. And so then they start to teach this thought to other people. And those people go, well, I want success like they have success. And they start following suit on that. And suddenly you have this whole movement of people following this person who has demonstrated success. They had this great thought. They worked hard at it. And where did that thought originally come from? Satan. And that's why this verse says these things that fuel natural ambition are earthly, natural, and demonic. You want to hear, so again, I was very into self-help aids, things that are supposed to help me get ahead in life. And I substituted a lot of time I could have been spending with the Lord, reading these books, listening to these audios. I mean, every day of my life, without fail, 15, 20, 30, an hour, 30 minutes, hour a day. That was like clockwork, day in and day out, tons of audios all day long. And so here's the thing. If you want to know where the first self-help tool came into being, it was called the forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden, right? Because what was Satan's promotion on that? If you'll eat this, if you'll use this thing, it will help you see differently. It'll help you get ahead. You will be able to be, essentially, I'm paraphrasing, smart enough that you can make your own decisions. Why would they not just ask God? Adam and Eve had access to God. No, that wasn't good enough. You need this fruit. You need this book. You need this audio. You need this guru. You need this seminar. You need to go to this conference. You need these, you need these people who've succeeded in the world to tell you how to succeed. That's what you need. Now, for you guys who've been around some of that stuff, tell me if that's not true. Now, am I saying that nobody out there except a preacher or a minister of the word can help you in life? Is that what I'm saying? No, that would be absolutely ridiculous, okay? Because God has good people that he's influenced in all types of different realms and so on. But what I am saying is there's a way to succeed the way God does it, which is learning and hearing from him and following through in obedience. And then there's a way the world does it, which is getting smarter and better and so on, and then using that as your way of getting ahead. And I know I'm maybe being a little redundant, but this was such a hard thing for me to separate in my mind. it was just very tough. But as I learned to separate those things, what I found is I started succeeding far more following God and seeing good fruit and good things come, not just in the physical world, but also spiritually. I was at peace. I wasn't like always running and anxious and trying to get something else accomplished, and I couldn't rest and all this different stuff. I saw that stuff drop, because in the world, a lot of times what you don't see is people who grind it out. They're going to make it happen. You don't always see the back end of their lives where their families are falling apart, or their relationships are falling apart, or they're depressed, or they're addicted to so many different things. And a lot of times they're addicted to the approval of people, which is why they're constantly broadcasting. If you ever notice that about people who have succeeded well and they're in social media, the social media space, they're always like putting out another tweet, another Facebook message, another this, another that. Everything they seem to do in their life is on camera, because that's how they, just like everyone else on Facebook is, I shouldn't say everyone else, but the vast majority of Facebook, it gives them an emotional high. People will just watch them and listen to them and hear their words of wisdom and all this different stuff. And so I'm trying to help save you from chasing that down, just to realize in the end, like, this isn't what I want. It's just a big illusion. And I'm not saying that those things can't help you get ahead financially. This Bible, this word I'm reading, doesn't say that if you listen to these people, this earthly, natural, demonic wisdom, you won't make more money. You may make more money. You won't get a bigger house. You may get a bigger house. You won't get nicer cars. You might get nicer cars. You might get all of that. But Jesus said, what does it profit you if you gain not just a new house or cars or nicer clothes or status? What does it profit you if you gain the entire world? They just give you the whole world, but then you lose your soul. And what is your soul? It's not just your spirit. You go to hell. That was bad. That's the ultimate bad. But your soul is also your mind, your will, your emotions, your personality. If all of these things are convoluted, but you got a grip of money in the bank, what did you really gain? You don't have any peace. You don't have any true lasting joy. You do definitely a lot of times have fleeting happiness. You get stuff and you're like, well, we're having so much fun. We're doing this, that. But when life finally slows down and you start to evaluate what's good, what's bad, what you really got, what you don't really have, you're going to find that you've wasted a lot of time where you don't have to do that. And so let's move on to 16. It says, for where jealousy and selfish ambition exists, there is disorder in every evil thing. And that's essentially what I was just conveying, is that when you're always trying to gun down the next person and get ahead in life, and it doesn't, a lot of times people that are, on, I guess what we can call the lower levels of life, they're not, millionaire status or even six-figure income earners or whatever the case may be. I'm saying from a worldly perspective, the lower levels of life, because God will take people like that, and they are the greatest and biggest people in heaven. They'll have glory forever, far more than financial wealth can buy you. But I'm saying from a worldly perspective, lower levels of life, a lot of times they're thinking, as you read these scriptures, they're like, yeah, those people out there need to watch that. No, I don't care if you work at McDonald's. I don't care if you, work at the most basic minimum wage job. Like I was a janitor for a while, and I, clean lots of toilets, mopped lots of stairs, and I worked at a movie theater at one point. I've done lots of just low level jobs or whatever the case may be. But even in those little areas, you can still have ambition that you're going to become this one thing, or you're going to get this, you're going to become, do these different things. And a lot of times people don't even stop to ask themselves, did God give me this in my heart, or is this something I came up with and now I'm chasing? And then this is what happens, trying to get God on board with my idea. Lord, I know you want me to succeed. Help me to get this. Help me to get this, whatever it happens to be. It's always like, I got an idea. God, come on board. And God will help you because, he's nice, and he's merciful and he's kind, and he realizes that we're ignorant and we don't always know what's going on. When I say ignorant, like we just don't know. But at a certain point, what you'll find is he'll stop going along with your ideas, and then you'll be out there by yourself. And then that's when people are like, where's God? I thought he's supposed to be a good, generous, benevolent God. Yeah, but before that, he is God. Okay. He has an agenda. He already has a plan, and he wants you on his plan because he's God. He created you, and so on. And so we're supposed to submit People don't like that. Submit our lives to God. That's what the word says, that we were bought with a price, and therefore we're supposed to glorify God with our bodies and with our spirits, because they belong to Him. We are owned people. And we talked about that in a different broadcast, a different Bible study, so I won't go back over that. But that ultimately, He is God. And so our ambition should be, God, I want to serve you. Our ambition should be, I want to do what you have for me. And so He says, where there's jealousy and selfish ambition, where those things exist, then you're going to find disorder. And that's why there's disorder in people's minds. I'll say that first and foremost, where it's just everything's always convoluted and crazy, and they can't seem to get any rest, and they wake up and they're overwhelmed. And why do you think in our society anxiety is so high? It's not because people are dwelling with God all the time and seeking Him and loving Him and just being filled with His love. That doesn't create an anxiety. Why is there so much depression? And that's huge, and I've been through both those things, and still this day, I have to watch, obviously guard against being anxious and overthinking things and so on. But I'm saying that stuff isn't generated because I'm just trusting and loving God in my life or your life. Why is depression so big? Why is there so many angry people? Why is there all these stressed out people? Why is there so many frustrated people? Why is all this? Well, because they're trying to accomplish something on their own and they're not resting in the Lord. Jesus said, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. All of you who are heavy laden, come to me. I am meek at heart. I will give you rest. He doesn't say I'll give you disorder. So disorder in our minds and people's minds becomes disorder in their lives. Disorder in their lives becomes disorder in their families, in their relationships, in their churches, in their businesses, in their jobs, in their finances, in their health. And so things aren't in order, and they're not sure why. But what they don't realize is they're running as hard as they can after their own things and not following God's things. And so the rest of this concludes by giving us the opposite. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, reasonable, unwavering, without hypocrisy. It's worth our while to take time to go through that list. And if we're considering something, how to get ahead, how to create finances, how to get someone on board with what we're trying to get them on board with, whatever that may be. That could be something relationally oriented, business oriented, whatever the case may be, organizational oriented in a church, and you have an idea. It'd be good to take that through this filter. Is this from God? Is it pure, or is it manipulative? If it's manipulative, you're like, if I say this, I know they'll do this. I could probably guilt trip them into this, whatever. If it's manipulative, it's not from God. What's the next thing on here? It's pure. So it's pure. There's no guile. There's no deceit in it. And then peaceable. Or is it argumentative? Like you're going to go in there and go to guns and tell people how it is. That's not from God. Gentle. According to this verse, is it gentle? Or is it like, I'm going to go in there again? Is it hard? If it's a hard-nosed idea and we're going to have to, like you saw this rioting and looting and angry protesting and things like that. You just think that was heaven's plan. Heaven's like, I want a bunch of people just to be angry and start breaking stuff, man. That would be great. Does that sound like God, or does that sound like Satan? You don't have to know either of them very well to figure out that's satanic. That's demonic wisdom. And does it sometimes get results? Oh, yes. It will get results. Hey, listen, a kid in Walmart throwing a temper tantrum gets results with their parents. If they have parents who don't know how to discipline them correctly, it doesn't mean that their temper tantrum is right. It's just because it gets the results the kid wants. Fine, I'll buy you this. Puts it in the cart, kid gets up, wipes his little face and nose, want another one, right? That's called manipulation. And if they don't get out of that, then they're grown adults. And instead of throwing themselves down on the Walmart floor, they're throwing bricks in through, car windows and smashing and looting, or yelling at politicians, or screaming at different, meetings of whatever their situation is. And so just doing the same thing, trying to get their way through violence and force. And God has a different way of doing that. And again, excuse me, if you don't believe me, I just want to remind you that Jesus changed the entire world, and he didn't have to do those things. You're like, well, what about when he cleared the temple? Okay, he cleared the temple, but if he cleared the temple, you better believe God put it on his heart to clear the temple, and he didn't have to hit anybody. You're like, he had a whip. Did it say he whipped anybody? Okay. People like to use that all the time. Remember, Jesus for 30 years went to that temple before he went into ministry, never cleared it one time. And in his ministry years, he did it twice, and it was symbolic. There was a specific reason for it, but that wasn't how he changed the world by clearing the temple. He changed the world by laying himself down, being beaten, brutalized, put on a cross, naked, and exposed for the world to see, buried, going to hell, and then his resurrection led him back to the throne of his Father, and he overcame everything through submission and humility, not through violence and pushing his way. So, I mean, don't be confused by that, because the world does push the opposite concept. They take all of Jesus' ministry. A lot of times people do this, and they boil it down to like, but he cleared the temple. I think that means I have a right to go to guns. All right. Let me know how that works out for you, because I've been there, and I'm telling you, lots of times I've been very argumentative in my life and try to use my words and to force my way and intellect to outthink people, and just got myself into trouble over and over. And then I did it the Lord's way, and it's worked out a lot better. So I have to watch that, but I know that that's right. So his ways are reasonable, it says here. Sometimes people are unreasonable. They throw reason out the window. They're like, I'm not going to talk about this. And they become totally can't be reasoned with, because they have an idea in mind, whether it be between spouses, in a family, in a business organization, in a church. They cannot be reasoned with. We want this. We want it our way. We sit this way, and this is the way it's got to be. Church split, business split, partnership split, divorce. That's what happens. And it's not, you're like, well, I just believe that I'm right, and I think that, you got to stand for what's right. Okay, let me know how that works out. I've been there. Full of mercy. Mercy, what is mercy? Mercy means someone has messed up, they've done you wrong, and you're going to give them, you're going to, let it go. Essentially, like, you deserve worse than this. You deserve for me to treat you badly. You treated me wrong, or you did something wrong here or there to people I know, people I love, and or to society in general, whatever. And yet we forget God has forgiven us all the debts that we owed him through the blood of Jesus on the cross, by that man hanging on that cross for us. And so I don't care what someone's done to you. It's nothing compared to what those people did to Jesus. And Jesus, looking down from a cross, barely able to breathe, suffocating up there, says, Father, forgive them, because they don't know what they do. And you're like, well, they do know what they do. These people do know what they're doing against me. Well, you know what you've done against God. And you know that times, just like myself, you knew you shouldn't have been doing it. You did it anyway. So what are you going to say about that to God? So you have to decide whether you want mercy or you don't want mercy. And if you don't feel like you're going to need mercy in life, okay, then feel free to, not be merciful to others, but that will come back to you, because the word says, the God can't be mocked. A person will reap what they sow. So if you don't sow mercy, you're not going to reap mercy. If you sowed hardness, you're going to reap hardness. But let's keep moving on here. It says that the wisdom that comes from God has good fruits. And that's why I keep saying, let me know how that turns out for you. One of the best telltale things in my life that I've learned to be able to tell what's me, what's God, because sometimes it's convoluted, I'm not sure, as I go back and look at the fruit. Like, what did this produce? Oh, this produced bondage in my life. This produced pain in my life. This produced, not at first, it looked good at first. It was, this was succeeding. It was making money. It was fun. It was exciting. It was whatever the case may be, whatever. And then, but I look at what it produced, maybe loneliness or just tiredness and being worn out and just et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I realize, like, okay, well, I don't want to go down that path again. And so if it's not producing good fruits in your family, in your life, your organization, in your church, then you take it to God again and look it over and see if it's from him. It says it's without hypocrisy. I could go on about this forever, because I think that's one of the biggest challenges with us, is that this double standard thing is, we want to yell at one person, but we have our own faults over here. And let's say, their faults are on faults A, B, C, and D. Our fault is fault D, and their fault is fault A. And so we're criticizing them because they're bad for these reasons. And, you should do this and you should do that. I don't like the way you do this and this, because Now, do they have faults of their own? Yeah, but it's not the same type of thing. So they're like, yeah, but at least I'm not doing A. This person is bad for these reasons. And it's like, listen, dude, lady, gentleman, ma'am, it doesn't matter. You got faults of your own. So you might want to make sure that you, as Jesus said, how do you look to take the speck out of your brother's eye when you got a log in your own eye? He says, first remove the beam from your eye. That way you can see clearly. And with mercy, with compassion, with these things to help your brother, remove the speck from their eye. And so we want to be the type of people that, make sure we get these things out of our own lives. And then we take the mercy, the kindness, the compassion of God that we've received, and we help our brother and sister in love. And so we're not hypocritical with our kids. Don't tell your kids, you need to behave this way and do these things. You need to listen, and you need to be honest, and you need to, these different blah, blah, blah. And, be kind to your siblings and all this. And then in the meantime, we're bad with our coworkers. We're trash talking people behind their back. We're slandering politicians and slandering our bosses. And we're not, doing well with people in our own lives, our brothers and sisters or family members or other people. And we're not getting along with them, but we're supposed to tell, the kids or whatever to do things right. So that's hypocrisy. And we want to get that out of our lives. And verse 18 ends James 3 by saying, and the seed whose fruit is righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. And so a seed in the Bible is often talking about sometimes an action, doing good. It could be even giving to somebody is looked at as a seed or whatever, but the seed whose fruit is righteousness. So whatever kind words are seeds that we can plant in a person's life and share with the person. And if it's producing righteousness, good wholeness, like it's helping a person, they're encouraged, they are doing better, they're inspired to keep going, they're inspired to get to know the Lord more, they're inspired to, get around the body of believers, they're inspired to not quit when they want to give up, they're inspired to not go their own way, but go God's way, and these different things. If these things that we're doing, our actions, are producing right fruits, good fruits are just the outcomes, the results. If you want to take away the analogy of the word fruit, if you're getting the right results and outcomes and godly outcomes in your situations, then that means you're sowing good seeds. And whether it be in your kids or a coworker or friends or family member or a spouse or anybody else. And I'd say a spouse too, because a lot of times it seems like people closest to us, they're like the people we think should be exempt from these things. Like, okay, I'll go out in the world and do these things, but at home, I'm going to be different. No, the opposite. At home, you should be stellar. And then you should take that stellar atmosphere you create out into the world. It should be them. The hierarchy of things goes God and then the family. So God is first in terms of your time, your priority, etc., etc. But I'm saying in terms of us sowing good, it shouldn't be like we go out and sow into other people all day long, and so we're tired, and so when we come home, we can let our hair down, which just means be rude and belligerent and unkind and uncaring and uncompassionate and not gentle and so on with these people at the house. That produces a lot of trouble at the house, and it produces kids that see hypocrisy, and they become rebellious kids. They become kids that do the same, get in trouble, and so on. And you're like, why is this happening? And you're sowing that through your actions into your children or your coworkers, or if you're a minister, into your people, or if you're an organizational leader, into your organization. People can see hypocrisy, obviously. And so at verse 18, repeating myself here a little, it says, and the seed whose fruit is righteousness is sown in peace by those who create, have an outcome of peace. And so if you're sowing things peaceably, there's not anxiety, there's not all this frustration, there's not, whatever it be, words, actions, behaviors, finances, whatever you're sowing, if you're doing it in peace with a heart. I'm not saying that you can't have things around you that are trying to compete and tempting you to be stressed and this type of stuff. I'm not trying to paint that picture, because that doesn't exist in the world. Even Jesus had all these things bombarding him and coming after him. But what he would do is he would look to his Father and center himself on his Father. And the more distressed he was, like before he went to the cross in the Garden of Gethsemane, the more he knew he had to pull away and just spend time with the Father until he could get rejuvenated and then go back out and handle these different things from a godly perspective. Jesus was not exempt from the stresses and cares of the world coming on. He just refused to. Did exactly what the word says. It says, cast your cares upon the Lord, for he cares for you. Jesus was sweating blood in the Garden of Gethsemane. He had anguish in his heart, and so he knew what to do with that. And so many of us, we don't know what to do with it. We don't know how to go to God and just say, God, I want to pour my heart out before you and believe and wait on you, and believing that he will fill us up from the inside out. So if you'll do that with him, he has a part. Don't ever forget, it's not all on your shoulders. God has a part too. And if we will trust him, if we will come to him, he will do his part as we make it available, as we make ourselves available to him to do that. Like Jesus said, all of you who are heavy burdened, come to me, for I am meek, I'm lowly in heart, and I will give you rest. And that's a promise, and he will do that. But you have to do your part, which is bring it to him. And I have to do that just the same. And so with that concludes our James 3 study. I know it went way longer than it normally does, but I noticed we were here at the end and all this kind of goes together. So I felt like we should go ahead and just finish it up. So we did. So all right, guys, that's going to be it for tonight. Of course, on Monday, presumably, God willing, we'll be back in our 1 Peter Bible study. And you can check some of that out, like I said, on our YouTube channel. But with that, I love you. And remember, God does not owe you a single thing, but he does love you. And that's why he's done more for you than anybody else ever has. And let's keep that in mind as we go through the rest of our day and the rest of our night whenever you watch this. All right, guys, love you. Next time. If you have found this teaching helpful, consider subscribing to the channel and click the notification bell. That way you'll be alerted whenever new content is released from the Faith, Hope, Love Initiative channel.